much the victim's family wish to make the victim impact stage.
Unless you're a parent and you've ever walked in the door and seen a child come to you with that love in their eyes and embrace you, you don't understand what I've been going through. We had to deal with a bunch of rumors and lies about why my son was killed on Valentine's Day, Your Honor.
It's gonna be a single gunshot wound to the head.
When I first get the call, I don't know what to think.
That's going to be our suspect vehicle right there.
I believe he may have did something.
Who were you referring to?
Driver, step out of the vehicle, slowly!
We may never find out the real truth behind why my son had to die.
The jury wants to know why. You know, the family wanted answers as well.
I'm hoping that he comes out and to the light and really tells the truth of what happened.
There was no direct evidence that my client shot anybody. We're going to war.
Without being able to present a motive, the jury could find him not guilty.
For those most affected by a homicide, the first 48 is just the beginning.
I just wish you would have had a chance to meet here and you would understand why we're so passionate about what we're seeking today.
This is the story of the fight for justice.
Anything else will not suffice.
In the weeks, months, and years.
For that 911, what is the address of your emergency? Hunter Ridge Lane, Norcross. And what's going on there? We heard at least 6 shots, and when we walked outside, this guy, he's laying on the ground bleeding. Does it feel like he's breathing? He's still breathing, barely. We've already got police and paramedics on the way.
It's had 111 to radio. It's gonna be a single gunshot wound to the head.
The victim is clinging to life.
Definitely not normal to get a call just before noon on Valentine's Day, Sunday. So you're thinking, you know, what kind of case am I walking into? Is this something that's random or is this something that's personal? It kind of makes it seem like the person who's responsible doesn't really care if anybody sees them.
Daylight murder, midday on Valentine's Day, brazen. When I first get the call, I don't know what to think.
Our victim's name?
Darian Dennis.
I'm still alive from what the officer said.
24-year-old Darian Dennis was a star football player when his high school won the state championship. A student at Hutchinson Community College, he plans to get a commercial driver's license.
Right there.
There was some spent shell casings. They looked to me to be about .40 caliber. And there was a .40 caliber Glock that was there.
That gun, it was next to his hand that was laid out flat. Like it was in his hand when he fell.
It appeared that the victim had gotten off some shots. There was no other shell casings. So where were the suspect's casings? There's no indication except for what are traditionally known as a defect, which is where a bullet passes through a wall.
He has 2 bullet holes through his wall. Hey, can you show us those bullet holes in your apartment?
They went through the kitchen area.
One is like in the stove.
There it is, right there.
It exited the kitchen interior wall and eventually exited the building. So high velocity, very powerful round. Given the size of the hole, it looked to me like it was going to be a rifle round.
Where are the casings, man?
But that was it. There was no other ballistic evidence.
Then,
What's that? No, God. Oh, God, no.
The victim's family had arrived on scene. You can't help but feel for them.
I was just in the house, like literally somebody called me, told me about it.
You live in the complex?
Yeah, we stayed in the back.
Issues with anyone here recently?
No issues with nobody.
I got a phone call from his mom, and she was hysterical, and she said, someone shot Darian. And my heart kind of went from my chest to my shoe.
You said what, Dad? Here.
Yes, sir. It's Officer Giles, Gwinnett County Police.
Yeah, officer, somebody said my son got shot.
Yes.
Your mind goes to who did it, why'd they do it, you know, what was it about? We went to the hospital, and when they walked in the room and told us that he had passed, it crushed me, crushed his mom. You want to just, you know, just hold him. And it's strange to feel your child with no life in him.
2 hours in, now it's a homicide case.
The dad said that the victim always carried a gun on him.
I made sure that both of my kids, when they were of age, were legal gun carriers. You want to be in a position to where you can protect yourself. You don't know what you're going to encounter. I mean, Darian was walking home from a store that he had walked home from 1,000 times without incident.
He said he decided to walk up to the A1 Market.
The convenience store was right across the street from where the incident had happened.
The witness over here across the street.
We found someone that was there.
I heard gunshots. Then later, like 30 seconds, a Toyota coming out. Four doors, cream color, with 2 holes in the driver's side. All you can see was 2 black males.
Defects in the driver's side door.
That would match the evidence that he squeezed off 2 rounds.
So let's say they pull up here. If someone's sitting in a car here, Dunning, look at the level at which the shot is. See, it's kind of low.
The first things that are going through my mind are inside this car. Are we going to find shell casings? Our next move was to see if we can identify that car.
Moments before the 911 call, a license plate reader near the complex captured a car matching the suspect vehicle.
LPRs are stationed all over Gwinnett County. License plate reader.
We'll have to see if we can track it. We were able to locate a cream-colored Toyota Camry. Last hit in Cobb County off of Bentley Road at 148.
Another LPR just photographed the same car, 17 miles away.
30 minutes ago, we got pretty lucky.
In Cobb. So they left the area quick.
Come up with an address out of Cobb?
Her last known address is in Marietta.
It looked like the vehicle was headed back to where the registered owner lived. And so at that point, we head out towards Cobb County.
You've arrived at your destination.
There it is. Pull the holes. Found the car. I'm starting to get excited. We knew we were on the right path.
Can they see you from the airport?
We don't know.
Here's a vehicle that we know was at a homicide scene in Gwinnett County moments earlier. I knew in my mind that a rifle was used. That's a game changer.
I don't want you guys to get shot.
In order for our safety, we kind of backed off a little bit, and then the Camry left the apartment complex.
Do not move!
Your heart's racing. How's this going to play out? Is it the suspect? Does the suspect have the weapon in the vehicle?
Driver, step out of the vehicle, slowly!
Walk slowly towards the sound of my voice. Stop. Is there anyone else in the vehicle? No.
It appears that this is going to be the registered owner that's driving the vehicle.
7 hours into the investigation.
Initially, we kind of wanted to go soft.
However, she may know exactly what happened.
Trying to figure out where you were and what you were doing today.
I got back home around 8.
Okay. Are you currently living with somebody?
So my ex-boyfriend, his friend lives with me.
What is his friend's name?
Quentin Lawton.
So you came back at 8 a.m. Where was Quentin?
I went into my room. I saw he might have been there. I'm not sure because I didn't see him. Around 10-ish, she came over.
She says a friend then picked her up to go shopping.
So what time did you actually get back to your apartment this evening?
It was around 6. And then I got in my car and I drove off.
Did you notice any damage to your vehicle?
When I was getting pulled over, I get out the car, I see like there's 2 holes on the driver's side. It was taped. I'm just like, what's going on?
Not really sure if I was buying that. When you first get in the car, it's pretty clear that your mirror is broken and there's duct tape on your driver door. So we knew we kind of had to go at her a little bit harder.
The reason why I'm asking all these questions is because your car was involved in a shooting. Unfortunately, the person who got shot didn't make it. So this is a homicide investigation. You're more than welcome to start over.
She did kind of like take those deep breaths, like the, okay, reality's kind of setting in.
I believe he may have did something.
Who are you referring to?
Quentin. I do have a spare key. I keep it in the kitchen.
So Quentin could potentially have access to your car.
He called me a lot today. It was after 11. He was like, something happened. He went and told me what happened. I did text him and I was like, are you good? He said, cleaning.
When he said he was cleaning, you didn't say, what the hell are you talking about?
I was just too focused on my own thing, so I was just like, okay.
Did he say anything about anybody being with him?
He didn't say, but I kind of like heard this guy. He's like 16.
Second individual. Sounds like what our initial witness said.
All you can see was 2 black males.
You don't have a problem with us looking through the phone?
No. I have him on Instagram. I think it's like...
She has contact information for both the teenager and Quentin.
We're going to be taking the phone for tonight, at minimum, okay?
Okay.
The adult.
30-year-old Quentin Lawton grew up in Florida and recently got married. He has a prior conviction for armed false imprisonment and served 6 years for robbery in Broward County, Florida.
We have Quentin, who is a grown man driving around potentially with a teenager. And outside that teenager being a family member, that's a little bit sketchy. Maybe there's some angle, street gang or something like that, and this could be an initiation where the teenager ends up committing a crime. We have our ideas and theories, but evidence hasn't come to light. We still don't know what happened.
The next morning,
the surveillance footage from the A1 Market that's Darian right there. Definitely eerie to see this. I mean, we're talking just minutes before he gets gunned down.
Apparently there wasn't an issue just prior to the homicide because he's not acting like there was. So what had happened on the street?
It's like he was supposed to meet somebody there or something. He's kind of walking off away from the building now, heading in the direction of his apartment complex. That's it. That's going to be our suspect vehicle right there. That kind of got me excited. What happened? What interaction did they have?
Do I believe that the suspect vehicle was maybe following the victim into the apartment complex?
Could it have been some sort of a drug deal? There's no evidence of it. But it had the feel that this was a personal thing as opposed to just a random act. Got to be a connection.
But the video doesn't show any interaction between the suspect vehicle and the victim. So that just, once again, leaves it as a mystery.
Turns right, pulls left into the apartment complex.
To see someone not a care in the world, and then within a minute or so, I mean, your life can be turned around in literally a second.
This is 1 minute away from when the gunshots go off. What happened back there? What led to Darian being killed?
And my brother always wanted me to do the right, like a real big brother and guardian. Like, he really took his role, like, seriously.
He had a tattoo on his rib cage, 5-inch letters, my brother's keeper, and a pair of boxing gloves that had Devontae and Jaden's names.
Darian, he's a big car head. Like, he loves cars. And this is Ruby B. This 03 Crown Vic, his #1 baby. I'm gonna give it another paint job. Definitely make sure they get the rims on it. Put it back as his dream of how he wanted it.
If he was around you, he was gonna have an impact on you. He made me better, and I don't know if I got a chance to let him know that he did that. But I know for a fact he loved me. And I know for a fact that he knew that I loved him.
You gotta find a connection and you gotta find a motive.
What happened and how it happened and who was involved. Ultimately, our goal is to find those things.
But as to why it happened, my motive is important to come up with.
The day after Darian's murder.
So we did the search warrant on the suspect vehicle. Hello. Flared out.
You could see based on the trajectory of the bullet, it went from the inside out.
See it singed and burnt?
Yeah.
That's from the muzzle.
The firearm that was used was almost touching the door. So that would definitely place it in the driver's possession.
It's almost in line with the steering wheel. If it was being shot from the passenger side, the driver would have to be laying back like completely. There's duct tape on the floorboard. Hoping we can find prints.
A week after Darian's homicide.
The owner of the vehicle, we got her phone records back.
Your FaceTime message was at 11:55.
Just 13 minutes after the murder, the owner of the vehicle FaceTimed with Quentin.
At 12 noon, she's researching body repair shops near me. At 2:30 that afternoon, she was researching Gwinnett County and homicide.
That would show that the owner of the vehicle knew that we were investigating a homicide while we were talking to her in the initial interview.
I'm just like, what's going on?
She was feigning all this surprise. She's a liar.
We definitely need to have another conversation. Hopefully that will lead us in the direction to obtain an arrest warrant for Quentin. I wanted to rehash some things.
Well, when people lie to you, you catch them in a lie. How do you go about a second interview with them? You know, give them a chance to correct themselves.
Quentin, did he physically come to you and say, hey, can I use your car? I gotta run out. Did that happen?
Yes.
And did he tell you what he needed to use your car for as opposed to his car?
No, he didn't say.
So he does whatever with your car, and then he makes a couple of phone calls to you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. He was panicking. And he said that somebody tried to rob him and they shot my car.
You see where this is like different than what you told me the initial day? It went from don't know a whole lot to now I have an armed robbery that happened that was never reported to the police. So I basically kind of spelled it out for him. You did a search warrant on your phone, okay? At one point, you start searching what happened. How did you know where it happened?
When we were getting ready to leave, we see him. He said that he's in Bishop Farms. I saw that there was homicide.
You didn't put two and two together and be like, who shot? Who shot who? Who did what? There's more to this, clearly, because you didn't tell me everything the first night. You're still not telling me everything today.
I am. I'm telling you everything.
After 2 weeks of reaching out to both suspects.
Hey, this is Detective Dunning.
It's headquarters calling.
All right, thanks. I got some information. It sounds like my main suspect, Quentin Lawton, retained an attorney. Quentin's looking to maybe lay down some sort of self-defense claim. The story that Quentin's telling him is that Quentin was driving the juvenile over to Peachtree Corners to go see a girlfriend. It was Valentine's Day. You know, we were lost, we were asking for directions, and somebody got aggressive with us. He got agitated real fast and immediately pulled a gun out. Next, his gunshots are being exchanged. I didn't buy the story, you know, GPS on your phone. If you're lost, why do you dump off into an apartment complex where our victim is walking to, and he ultimately ends up shot and killed? Everything points in the direction of you being deceptive, that you're guilty, and that you're running. His story, it just doesn't make sense. It just looks like they were prepared for a little bit more than a date.
All we have now is a story from the suspect, which doesn't appear to be exactly what happened.
And for me to just take a statement from his attorney that this was self-defense and we should just wash our hands of it, I'm not taking that at all.
You got enough to take warrants out of him.
Since he didn't want to voluntarily come in for a statement, we had to move on with the evidence that we had.
1 month since Darian's murder.
We were able to get arrest warrants for Quentin in the case. Definitely, it's a big win for us.
As the warrants unit keeps watch on the residence of one of Quentin's friends.
I was really motivated to do what I could for Mr. Dennis. Mr. Dennis, how are you?
Hey, good morning.
There are 2 individuals that we're looking at, and one individual, I went ahead and secured an arrest warrant.
We've been praying that we could get a resolution to it. Bittersweet. The minute that Detective Dunning told us we have a suspect, now you're fixated. You're fixated on why'd they do it? You know, what was it about?
We're doing everything we can to help you and your family and your son.
This one picture means a lot to us. because it kind of embodies Darian's spirit. I want you to have this. I want you to kind of think about this guy and how you got him the justice that we need. I'm touched, man. I appreciate it on your desk. God bless you. It's one of my favorite pictures of Darian doing something sports related. He's perfect in this picture. He's got the ball high and tight. He's stiff arming the defender. If you look at his eyes, he's laser focused. He's ready to do a little damage there.
He wanted me to have that as motivation.
Detective Dunning.
At his friend's apartment, Quentin is taken into custody.
All right, sir, thank you. He did not want to speak with detectives at the time of his arrest. He was transported to the Gwinnett County Jail. It's good to know that somebody is being held accountable. It was exciting, but not case closed.
Almost 2 months later.
It was nice to get our hands on the phone records. There's got to be a connection. Some communication between Quentin and Darian.
Some electronic evidence that they knew each other, but that's not what we found.
There were no phone calls between Darian and Quentin. I was surprised. It's still kind of a mystery as to why it happened. The phone records for Quentin, take a look.
The cell site location information for the suspect's phone, that's extremely important because remember, no one was able to ID him. They're at the scene.
Right at 11:30, Quentin's phone pings off the nearest tower, so close.
That's damning because he was there. At this point here, the only solution for this case is go to trial.
Quentin Lawton, unfortunately, he didn't make a statement when he was arrested. So the big question I had when I first got the case was why? There are a number of theories. Is a drug deal / robbery? Was this revenge for something? Was there some prior difficulties between the parties? Somebody was talking to someone's girlfriend. Sales transaction on Facebook Marketplace or something similar. Was this some sort of gang activity? With ruling out all the likely motives, that was a problem. A jury wants to know why. The family wanted answers as well.
We knew what type of kid Darian was, man. If you knew him, you wouldn't even speculate or say anything that ridiculous. But for whatever reason, this person thought it was justified to kill Darian. And we had every imaginable weird rumor, and nobody can give you answers.
Without being able to present a motive to the jury, it wasn't a slam dunk case. There was a risk involved. The jury could find him not guilty. There were things left unresolved. There was still the juvenile. That phone number that was associated with the juvenile was not in the area of the murder. It was many miles away, but Quentin could be a source of that corroborating information against the teenager. Quentin Lawton needed to cooperate.
I came into the case August of 2022. At that point in time, the charges were felony murder, aggravated assault, possession of a firearm. So that's a pretty serious case. When I'm going to trial, I like to put the prosecutor on notice. Don't make any plans for your anniversary. Don't make any plans for your child's birthday party. I'm going to war.
If I was a defense attorney, I would go with the self-defense route. We know the victim fired his gun.
But self-defense requires you to say, I did it. So for me, it wouldn't have been a self-defense case because Quentin is sort of like a bystander. And there was no direct evidence that my client, Quentin Lawton, shot anybody.
The evidence against Quentin Lawton, very strong circumstantial evidence.
That's flat not true.
The car owner indicated that Quentin Lawton had possession of the car.
Quentin borrows her vehicle. He easily could have loaned the car to somebody else without her knowledge.
He told her that somebody had tried to rob him and they shot up her car. She described him as panicked.
And I suspect he's going to be panicked because he's bringing her car back with 2 bullet holes in it.
CSI were able to lift several latent prints off the vehicle. Prints of Quentin Lawton, and his fingerprint was found on the exterior side of a duct tape roll.
That makes perfect sense. Put duct tape over the bullet holes so I'm not stopped by other police saying, hey, why do you have these bullet holes in your car?
His cell phone was in the location of the murder. He had borrowed the car and was present at the time of the murder.
Quentin's phone is probably there and it can just be sitting in the vehicle. But what we don't know from all this evidence is that Quentin was there, and that's the problem. We can see very well why they put handcuffs on my client, but we can also explain to you why you should take the handcuffs off.
I knew there was a risk at going to trial. So I called Dwayne and told him that I was considering offering the defendant a deal for him to plead to something less than felony murder.
It's a tough decision to make as a family, but we need to know the truth about what happened to my son. And the only way we could really get access to that was by making a deal.
Can we go ahead and have the defendant out, please?
Quentin Lawton's plea hearing begins.
When I saw him, strangely, I felt sorry for him. He looked pitiful.
Are here this afternoon for purposes of Mr. Lawton entering a plea. Judge, Mr. Lawton will be entering a plea to voluntary manslaughter. A special condition of this guilty plea, he will cooperate fully with further investigation in the case.
I'm not interested in any BS. I want the truth about what happened to my son.
Do you understand that?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know if everybody else feels this sort of hesitation. And I don't want you to enter any plea you don't want to enter into.
Because there is a delay.
So, did you in fact commit the offense to which you're now pleading guilty?
Quentin Lawton can say no. A defendant always has the ability to stop the process.
Can I say something?
Sure you can.
You've been sitting in a cell for almost 3 years. You knew this day was coming. What was going on?
Am I not supposed to be hesitant alone?
No. I think Quentin felt the weight of the moment.
He's just making sure you're doing what you want to do. Do you want to go ahead and proceed with this plea today?
Yes, ma'am.
Even though you may appear to be hesitant?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead.
There's a difference between saying, yes, I'm going to take voluntary manslaughter at the jail, and now standing in front of the judge and saying, I did it, so please give me 10 years in prison.
Mr. Lawton, wish to enter a guilty plea.
Thanks, sir.
Quentin Lawton admits in front of the world, in front of Darian's family, his involvement in the murder of Darian Dennis.
Judge, the victim's family is present in the courtroom, and I believe they wish to know that the victim in fact stayed.
Part of me wanted to speak directly to the defendant because you kind of want to peer into that person and see if they have a soul. Unless you're a parent
and you've ever walked in the door and seen a child come to you with that love in their eyes and embrace you, you don't understand what I've been going through.
I wanted to make sure he heard the pain in my voice, that he understood, and what they took from us was immeasurable.
We had to deal with a bunch of rumors and lies. One of the things that is the most hurtful about this is we may never find out the real truth behind why my son had to die.
The plea negotiation was the beginning of another chapter in the case.
I'm so sorry for your loss. And given a chance to let you know what really happened, I would do that.
Well, the special terms and conditions of probation outlined by the state, and in my personal opinion, most important one is the cooperation. Is that something you are giving everybody your word that you will carry out?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm hoping that he comes out and to the light and really tells like what was the reason and the truth of what happened on Valentine's Day of 21.
We have a beautiful family. Some people come in here very alone during this process.
I just wish you would have had a chance to meet Darren. You would understand why we're so passionate about what we're seeking today. And the only thing we're really concerned about is truth and justice, and anything else will not suffice.
Imagine a big puzzle of your family. Big, important piece. That piece is gone. Quentin didn't get sentenced the state we did. We got sentenced. We got sentenced to life. I hope he's cooperative and does what he's supposed to do.
The next day,
investigators with Gwinnett County Police Department went over to the jail for Quentin to give a statement.
So we're just here to see what you can provide as part of your deal.
We just ended up going to Gwinnett.
Quentin says he was not alone when he rode into Darian's neighborhood.
I knew somebody that lived over there too. But was trying to get dropped out first, so we ended up turning on that little street.
There was an encounter between the occupants of Quentin's vehicle and the victim, Darian.
Now, this is Dane. I didn't know him. I never met him before.
Are we talking about the victim?
Yes.
Okay.
Turning around, backing up, don't see him, and almost hit him. He bam on the trunk. Hey man, what y'all doing?
Quentin Long claims that started an argument.
You could see the bulge in his pocket.
Quentin says Darian was carrying a weapon.
That dude reached for his gun. When he reached out for it, that shit happened so fast, it's crazy. Because the only thing I heard was gunshots. When I looked, I didn't see dude standing nowhere though.
It kind of reminds me of a road rage incident where, someone's get shot for what?
But who was shooting?
There were at least one other individual that was involved in the shooting. So the investigation in this case is ongoing. There are obviously things that we need to kind of hold tight so we can follow up on and not jeopardize any future prosecutions in the case. But the statements as to motive, I felt like Dwayne really needed that question answered.
Weeks later.
Hopefully, speaking to the DA, finding out what evidence they've been able to compile. We'll kind of put the pieces of the puzzle that we don't know back together.
So Quentin Long did make some statements as to the why. He stated that they were turning the car around and he bumped Darian or got very close to him, which started an argument. There was an individual in the car that was armed, and shots were fired. Your son was in the wrong place, the wrong time.
Wow. Right.
So it seemed like a random act.
That's wow. You know, I don't even know how to
process it.
How to process it,
Right.
you know, because that's something that could have, it didn't have to escalate to that.
No.
To hear confirmation that our son is exactly who we've always thought he was. The word I keep using is bittersweet. And, you know, and it's more bitter than sweet.
Valentine's Day brings up all those emotions, like when you're walking into store, everybody else is thinking about candy and teddy bears and balloons, and we're thinking about Darian. Whenever I see a picture or I hear a story that I haven't heard before, it's kind of like opening up a new gift, so that's the way we keep them alive. Like always, I miss you. We miss you. Can't wait to see you again.
Some secrets refuse to die. They wait. Not beneath the ground. Not inside forgotten evidence lockers. But inside ordinary people who convince themselves that silence is safer than the truth. For 43 years, the disappearance of Sarah Whitmore remained the oldest unsolved mystery in Black Ridge County. One woman. One winter night. One empty road. No body. No confession. No answers. The case destroyed careers, divided families, and haunted an entire Kentucky community long after the headlines disappeared. Then, just as everyone believed the mystery would outlive the people who remembered it, an old detective, already retired, already forgotten by most of the department, opened a cardboard box in the corner of his garage. Inside were dusty notebooks, yellowed photographs, cassette recordings, a hand-drawn map, and one sentence he had written to himself in faded blue ink nearly half a century earlier. The answer isn't missing. The wrong question was asked. That sentence would become the final clue, not because it introduced new evidence, because it forced investigators to see the old evidence differently. January 12, 1981. Black Ridge County woke beneath freezing rain. The roads were coated with ice. The hills disappeared beneath heavy fog. The small farming community moved slowly through another ordinary Monday. Nobody imagined the day would become part of local history. Sarah Whitmore was 28. She taught history at the county high school. She lived alone in a small white house outside town. Students describe her as patient. Neighbors describe her as private. Friends describe her as stubborn enough to chase the truth, even when everyone else had stopped asking questions. She had no known enemies, no criminal history, no financial problems, nothing that suggested she would simply disappear. That afternoon, she stayed late, grading exams. Several teachers remembered speaking with her before sunset. She laughed. She talked about an upcoming school trip. She promised to bring homemade pie to the faculty meeting on Friday. Friday came. Sarah never did. At 6:42 p.m., she left the school parking lot. A student remembered seeing her old blue sedan disappear into the snowfall. That was the last confirmed sighting. At least, that was what investigators believed for decades. When Sarah failed to arrive home, her sister reported her missing early the next morning. Deputies searched every mile of roadway between the school and her house. Nothing. State police joined the search. Nothing. Volunteers walked frozen fields. Nothing. Helicopters scanned rivers and abandoned barns. Nothing. Her car vanished with her. No skid marks. No broken glass. No signs of violence. It was as though both woman and vehicle had simply dissolved into the winter air. Within days, Rumors spread faster than facts. Some believed she had run away. Others whispered about an affair. A few insisted organized criminals had passed through the county. Every theory sounded convincing. None matched the evidence. Detective Thomas Grayson refused to accept easy explanations. At 38 years old, he had spent more than a decade investigating violent crime. He believed every disappearance left a pattern. The challenge was finding it before time erased the details. He interviewed everyone: family, friends, co-workers, mechanics, gas station attendants, hunters, truck drivers. He filled notebook after notebook with observations. One witness remembered headlights on a logging road. Another remembered hearing an engine after midnight. A waitress recalled Sarah meeting someone she did not recognize only days before disappearing. Every lead seemed promising. Every lead collapsed. The weeks became months. The months became years. Boxes filled with reports lined the sheriff's evidence room. New detectives inherited the case. Older detectives retired. Eventually, Sarah Whitmore became known by two words nobody wanted to hear: cold case. The file gathered dust. The photographs faded. Evidence labels curled with age. Families stopped expecting phone calls. Black Ridge continued living around an unanswered question. But Detective Grayson never threw away his personal notebooks. He could not explain why. Something about the case felt unfinished. Not impossible. Simply incomplete. Every anniversary, he reread the witness interviews. Every anniversary, he circled the same page. One interview. One statement. One detail everyone ignored because it seemed too ordinary. A delivery driver named Walter Briggs told investigators he saw Sarah's blue sedan parked near the abandoned Ash Creek Bridge shortly after 7 that evening. Police checked the bridge repeatedly. They found nothing. Investigators assumed Walter had confused the date. The statement remained in the file, untouched, ignored. Years passed. Technology improved. DNA solved impossible murders. Fingerprint databases expanded. Old evidence found new life. Yet Sarah's disappearance remained frozen in time. Then Detective Grayson retired. Colleagues shook his hand, presented him with a plaque, closed his office. Life moved on. His notebooks moved into cardboard boxes stacked inside a dusty garage. For 15 years they remained there, until one rainy afternoon. Grayson was cleaning shelves when one notebook slipped from the stack. Loose papers scattered across the concrete floor. As he gathered them, one sketch caught his attention. Ash Creek Bridge. Not the bridge itself. The hills surrounding it. He stared at the drawing. His younger self had circled an old service road almost hidden by trees. Next to it he had written, "Road blocked after flood. Verify witness position." He frowned. He remembered the flood. County workers closed one entrance months before Sarah disappeared, which meant Walter Briggs could not have been where investigators believed he was. If Walter truly saw the blue sedan, he had been standing somewhere else entirely. Grayson unfolded the original map, measured distances, compared road closures. For the first time in 40 years, the witness statement made sense. Walter had not been looking toward Ash Creek Bridge. He had been looking toward the abandoned Miller Quarry. No detective had ever searched there. Not once. The realization stole his breath. 43 years. Thousands of investigative hours. Hundreds of interviews. Dozens of search warrants. And an entire investigation may have been built around one incorrect assumption about where a witness had been standing. The next morning, Grayson drove to the sheriff's office carrying 3 notebooks under his arm. Most deputies knew him only as a retired detective whose photograph still hung in the hallway. Sheriff Elena Brooks listened quietly while Grayson explained the map. No dramatic speech. No grand theory. Just measurements, road records, old weather reports, and one overlooked mistake. She agreed to reopen the location analysis, not because she believed the case was solved, because the evidence deserved one last honest look. 2 days later, drones flew above the overgrown Miller Quarry. Ground-penetrating radar swept terrain untouched since the early 1980s. Investigators expected nothing. Instead, the radar detected a large metallic object buried beneath decades of collapsed earth near the edge of the flooded quarry road. The object measured roughly the size of a passenger vehicle. Silence settled across the command post. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Grayson simply stared at the monitor. 43 years of frustration narrowed into one impossible image beneath layers of soil and stone. If the radar was correct, then Sarah Whitmore had never disappeared from Black Ridge County. She had been waiting there all along, and somewhere beyond the buried vehicle. The truth that had escaped an entire generation of investigators was finally beginning to surface. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The radar image changed the atmosphere at the command post instantly. No one celebrated. Experienced investigators knew better. Ground-penetrating radar could detect abandoned machinery, farm equipment, collapsed storage tanks, or countless other objects hidden beneath decades of earth. Hope had ruined investigations before. Hope made people see answers where none existed. Sheriff Elena Brooks ordered the area secured. No heavy equipment. No unnecessary movement. Everything would be documented exactly as if the disappearance had happened yesterday. News of the discovery spread through Black Ridge County before sunset. Within hours, television vans lined the entrance to the old quarry road. Residents gathered behind police tape despite the freezing wind. Many had been children when Sarah Whitmore disappeared. Others remembered joining volunteer searches in 1981. Some still carried faded newspaper clippings folded inside family photo albums. Everyone asked the same question. Could this finally be the end? Detective Thomas Grayson stayed away from the cameras. He stood alone beneath a line of leafless oak trees overlooking the excavation site. For 43 years, he had imagined hundreds of different endings. None of them felt real anymore. The excavation began the following morning. Layer after layer of compacted soil was removed by hand. Forensic archaeologists worked slowly, photographing every inch before touching anything. The process took hours. Then an investigator stopped digging. A section of faded blue paint had appeared beneath the earth. No one spoke. Grayson recognized the color immediately. It matched the photographs taken outside Black Ridge High School in January of 1981. Sarah Whitmore's sedan had been blue, exactly that shade. More soil disappeared. A chrome bumper emerged, then a cracked headlight. The front of a small sedan slowly returned to daylight after more than 4 decades underground. The license plate was still attached. The numbers were barely visible beneath rust, but they matched the registration in Sarah Whitmore's file. The car had been found. An entire generation of investigators had searched rivers, forests, caves, abandoned barns, and neighboring counties. All the while, the vehicle rested less than 6 miles from town, hidden beneath a landslide that occurred months after Sarah vanished. The discovery stunned everyone, but it immediately created another question. If the car had remained here all along, why had no one found it? Geologists supplied the answer. County records showed that a severe spring storm struck the quarry less than 3 months after Sarah disappeared. Thousands of tons of loose rock collapsed from the eastern wall. The slide buried the access road completely. What had once been visible became part of the landscape. Trees eventually grew over the debris. Nature had erased the scene long before investigators realized they were searching the wrong location. As the excavation continued, forensic specialists carefully opened the driver's door. The interior was remarkably intact considering its age. The ignition key remained in place. Sarah's leather handbag rested on the passenger seat. Her reading glasses lay on the dashboard. A history textbook sat in the back seat beside a stack of ungraded exams. The sight hit everyone harder than expected. It looked as though someone had simply stepped away for a moment, frozen in time, waiting to continue a journey interrupted 43 years earlier. But Sarah was not inside the vehicle. Investigators searched every inch of the cabin. Nothing. No remains. No signs of violence. No obvious explanation. The mystery had changed. The missing car was no longer missing. Only Sarah was. Forensic technicians began cataloging every item inside the sedan. Most appeared ordinary. Receipts, pens, cassette tapes, winter gloves. Then one technician noticed something unusual beneath the driver's seat. A small portable cassette recorder. Its plastic casing was cracked. Its batteries had long since corroded, but a tape remained inside. Evidence technician Rachel Kim carefully removed it using gloves. The label contained only 2 handwritten words. Monday night. No date. No explanation. The recorder was sealed and transported immediately to the State Forensic Laboratory. While specialists worked on the tape, investigators examined the quarry itself. The old service road curved sharply around a steep rock wall before ending near an abandoned maintenance building. The building had collapsed years earlier. Its roof had disappeared. Its windows were gone. But one feature remained intact: a steel observation platform overlooking the quarry. Detective Grayson climbed the rusted staircase slowly. From the platform, the entire area became visible: the buried road, the recovered sedan, the entrance Walter Briggs would have seen from the highway. For the first time since 1981, Grayson understood the witness statement perfectly. Walter had never been looking toward Ash Creek Bridge. He had been looking directly at the quarry road. His memory had been correct. The investigation had interpreted it incorrectly. One small mistake. 43 years of consequences. Later that afternoon, another discovery was made. Search teams found fresh damage on an old guardrail, preserved beneath layers of collapsed earth. The metal was bent outward. Paint fragments still clung to the steel despite decades underground. Laboratory analysis later confirmed they matched Sarah's vehicle. The evidence suggested the sedan had struck the guardrail before leaving the roadway. But something still refused to make sense. The angle was wrong. According to accident reconstruction specialists, the damage was inconsistent with a driver accidentally losing control on ice. The impact suggested the car changed direction suddenly, almost violently, as if Sarah had attempted to avoid something in front of her, or someone. The possibility transformed the investigation once again. Sheriff Brooks requested every surviving witness from 1981 be interviewed. Many were now in their 70s or 80s. Some struggled to remember details. Others surprised investigators with astonishing clarity. One name kept appearing: Daniel Mercer, a volunteer firefighter in 1981. Daniel had participated in the original search, but had never been considered an important witness. When detectives visited his home, he hesitated before answering questions. Eventually, he admitted something he had never reported. On the night Sarah disappeared, he drove past quarry entrance shortly after 7 o'clock. He remembered seeing 2 vehicles: Sarah's blue sedan, and an unfamiliar dark pickup truck parked nearby with its headlights off. At the time, he assumed 2 motorists had stopped because of the icy roads. He continued driving. The next morning, Sarah was missing. Daniel thought about reporting the truck. Then he convinced himself it probably meant nothing. 43 years later, his voice trembled as he spoke. I kept telling myself someone else must have seen it. Nobody had. Investigators immediately searched old vehicle registration records. Thousands of pickup trucks had existed in Kentucky during 1981. The lead seemed impossible, until another forgotten document surfaced. Inside Detective Grayson's original notebook was a page folded twice. He had written only one sentence beside a partial license plate collected from an anonymous phone call. Ki bon moi bai, black pickup near quarry. The remaining numbers were smudged beyond recognition. Grayson closed his eyes. He remembered the call now. It arrived 3 days after Sarah disappeared. The caller refused to identify himself. He claimed a dark pickup had been parked near the quarry that evening. Without a complete plate number, investigators could do little. The tips slowly disappeared beneath newer leads. Now 2 independent witnesses described the same vehicle, separated by decades, connected by the same forgotten road. The cold case was no longer about a woman who vanished into thin air. It was becoming the story of a meeting that should never have happened. Somewhere inside the recovered sedan, inside the damaged guardrail, inside the decades-old cassette tape, waiting in a forensic laboratory, the next piece of the truth was still hiding. And Detective Thomas Grayson could not escape one unsettling thought. He had been standing within sight of the answer 43 years earlier. He simply didn't know where to look. Fictional true crime story. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The discovery of Sarah Whitmore's abandoned sedan reopened a wound that Black Ridge County had spent decades trying to forget. For years, the town had accepted the possibility that Sarah had disappeared by choice. Some believed she left Kentucky. Some believed she started a new life somewhere far away. Some even believed she was never coming back. But the recovered vehicle destroyed those theories in a single afternoon. Sarah had not walked away. She had not vanished. She had been taken from the road. She traveled every day. And now investigators were facing the question that had haunted every cold case detective who touched the file. Who was waiting for her that night? The forensic examination of the sedan continued around the clock. Every object inside the vehicle was treated as a potential message from the past. The steering wheel, the door handles, the seats, the floor mats, even the smallest pieces of dirt trapped beneath the tires. 43 years had passed, but investigators knew one thing. Time does not always destroy evidence. Sometimes it preserves it. The first major discovery came from the driver's side door. A fingerprint was recovered from the inside handle. The print was incomplete, damaged by moisture, but modern technology allowed analysts to compare it against updated databases. The result came back 2 days later. No match. A dead end. But investigators were not discouraged, because the absence of a match created another possibility. The fingerprint did not belong to anyone in the system. It belonged to someone who had never been investigated, someone unknown. The second discovery came from the trunk. Inside was a small brown envelope. The paper had deteriorated. The ink had faded, but the contents remained readable. It contained 3 photographs, all taken at the same location, the old Black Ridge County Courthouse. The images showed people entering the building. At first glance, they seemed meaningless, random photographs. But Detective Grayson immediately recognized one person, Thomas Keller, a local businessman who had owned several properties around the county in 1981. He had never been connected to Sarah's disappearance. He was considered a respected member of the community, a person people trusted. But there was something strange. Sarah had never mentioned him in any interview, never listed him as a friend, never listed him as someone she knew. So why was she photographing him? Investigators dug deeper into Thomas Keller's history. They discovered that in 1980, he had purchased land near Miller Quarry, the same land where Sarah's car was eventually found. The property transfer appeared normal, until investigators found one unusual detail. The sale was completed less than 30 days after Sarah disappeared. And the previous owner? The county records clerk who processed the paperwork was Sarah Whitmore's former history teacher, a man named Harold Vance. The connections began forming, slowly, carefully, like pieces of a puzzle that had been scattered for decades. Sarah had not been investigating random events. She had been following something involving land, money, and people who had influence in Black Ridge County. The recovered cassette tape became the next major breakthrough. After days of restoration, forensic audio specialists managed to extract the recording. The first seconds contained only static. Then came a sound, a car engine, wind, a door closing, and finally Sarah's voice. Quiet, controlled, but clearly afraid. Investigators stopped everything when they heard her speak. For 43 years, Sarah Whitmore had been silent. Now her voice returned from the past. The recording was short, only 6 minutes. But those 6 minutes changed the case forever. Sarah was speaking to someone, a man. His voice was calm, almost familiar. The conversation was difficult to understand, but several phrases were clear. You said this would stay buried. A pause. Then Sarah said, I know what happened. The male voice responded, You don't understand what you're involved in. Another pause. Then Sarah, I understand enough. The recording ended with a sudden noise, a struggle. The device hit the ground, and then silence. Nobody in the room spoke after the tape stopped, because they finally knew Sarah Whitmore had not disappeared randomly. She had discovered something serious enough that someone wanted to stop her. But the recording raised another question. Who was the man speaking to her? Audio experts attempted voice comparison, but the recording quality was too poor. The voice could not be identified with certainty. Investigators needed more. They returned to Sarah's life before the disappearance. They examined her school records, her financial history, her personal relationships. They discovered that in the months before she vanished, Sarah had become increasingly interested in local property disputes. She had been researching historical land ownership for a school project. At least, that was what she told people. But hidden among her papers was a different file, a folder labeled Black Ridge Archive. Inside were copies of old property documents, newspaper articles, handwritten notes, and a list of names. At the top of the list was Thomas Keller. Below him were several other influential residents. The final name shocked investigators. Harold Vance, Sarah's former teacher, the same man who had processed the property documents, the same man connected to the land near the quarry, the same man who had never mentioned Sarah's investigation. When detectives located Harold Vance, he was 84 years old. He lived quietly outside the county. When asked about Sarah, his expression changed immediately. He claimed he barely remembered her. But investigators noticed something. A framed photograph on his bookshelf. A photograph of Black Ridge High School, taken in 1981. Sarah Whitmore was standing in the background. Harold claimed he kept it because he saved all school memories. But investigators found another detail. Written on the back of the photograph were 5 words. She knew about the land. Harold refused to explain. For the first time in 43 years, investigators had a direct connection between Sarah and the people connected to the quarry. But the deeper they searched, the more complicated the story became. Because the evidence suggested Sarah was not investigating a murder. She was investigating something that happened before the night she disappeared. Something involving stolen property, hidden agreements, and a secret that powerful people had protected for decades. Detective Grayson returned home that night, unable to sleep. He opened his old notebook again, the same notebook that started everything. Near the back was another forgotten page, a note he had written after interviewing Sarah's sister in 1981. One sentence stood out. Sarah was afraid of someone, but she wouldn't say who. For 43 years, Grayson had interpreted that sentence differently. He thought Sarah was afraid because she was in danger. Now he understood. She was afraid because she knew exactly who she was investigating. And whoever that person was had spent 4 decades believing the truth was buried forever. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The investigation into Sarah Whitmore's disappearance had changed completely. What began as a missing person case had become something far more dangerous. A hidden network of secrets. A chain of decisions made by people who believed they could control the truth forever. And at the center of it all was one question. What did Sarah discover before she disappeared? The answer appeared to be connected to land. But investigators quickly learned that land was only the surface. The deeper they went, the more they uncovered a story about power, influence, and a group of people who had spent decades protecting one another. Detectives returned to the courthouse archives, the same place where Sarah had photographed Thomas Keller entering the building, the same place where property records had been altered, the same place where she believed something was hidden. The archive room had changed dramatically since 1981. Computers had replaced paper files. Old documents had been moved into storage. But one thing remained. the original records. Thousands of pages stored in boxes that had not been opened for years. Forensic document specialists began comparing property transfers from the late 1970s and early 1980s. At first, nothing seemed unusual. Then they found a pattern. Several rural properties near Miller Quarry had changed ownership under strange circumstances. Owners sold land at prices far below market value. Some documents were signed within hours of each other. Some witnesses claimed they never appeared before a notary. The names kept appearing. Thomas Keller, Harold Vance, and another name investigators had not previously considered, Richard Bell. In 1981, Richard Bell was a county sheriff, a respected law enforcement official, the person responsible for overseeing the original search for Sarah Whitmore. The discovery stunned investigators. The man leading the investigation had a possible connection to the very secret Sarah was trying to expose. Detective Grayson immediately reviewed the original case files. For the first time, he looked at his own investigation with suspicion, not because he believed he had ignored evidence, because he wondered if someone had influenced what evidence was available. The original search records showed something unusual. A search team had planned to examine Miller Quarry 3 days after Sarah disappeared, but the search was canceled. The reason listed in the report? Insaf terrain. However, weather records from that week showed the conditions were manageable. The quarry had not been considered too dangerous. Someone had decided not to search there, and that decision had never been explained. Grayson stared at the document for several minutes. 43 years earlier, he had trusted the information given to him. Now he wondered who had controlled that information. The investigation moved toward Richard Bell, but finding answers would not be easy. Richard had died in 2003. His records were limited. His personal files had disappeared. His family refused interviews. But investigators discovered one surviving witness, a former dispatcher named Linda Morris. In 1981, Linda was 22 years old. She worked overnight shifts at the sheriff's office. She remembered the night Sarah disappeared. She remembered the phone calls, the search orders, the confusion. In one conversation she never forgot, Linda told investigators that shortly after Sarah was reported missing, Sheriff Bell received a private phone call. After the call ended, his behavior changed. He immediately ordered deputies to focus searches away from Miller Quarry. When Linda asked why, Bell told her, "Because that's not where we need to look." At the time, she assumed he knew something. She trusted him. Years later, she realized something different. He may have been directing them away from the truth. Linda also revealed another detail. The night Sarah disappeared, a second call came into the station. A man reported seeing Sarah's car near the quarry. The call was never entered into the official log. Linda remembered writing it down on a piece of paper. That paper disappeared. The discovery created a major breakthrough. For decades, investigators believed only one witness had seen Sarah near the quarry, Walter Briggs. Now, they knew there had been another, someone whose information had been removed. The question became, who deleted the call, and why? Investigators searched through archived phone records. Most were destroyed, but one remained, a billing record from the local telephone company. It showed a call placed at the sheriff's office at 7:18 p.m. on January 12, 1981. The caller's number belonged to a private residence, a residence owned by Thomas Keller, the man Sarah had been photographing, the man connected to the quarry property, the man whose name appeared repeatedly in the hidden documents. Investigators visited the old Keller property. The house had changed owners several times, but the current owner allowed them to search a storage building behind the home. Inside, they found boxes left behind by previous residents. Most contained ordinary household items. Then they found a locked metal container. Inside were old business records, bank statements, property agreements, and a photograph. A photograph showing 3 men standing outside Miller Quarry: Thomas Keller, Harold Vance, and Richard Bell. The date on the back was January 5, 1981, 1 week before Sarah disappeared. The discovery was explosive. It proved the three men had a connection, but it did not prove they were responsible. Investigators still needed to understand what Sarah had found. The answer came from a document hidden beneath the business records. A contract, an agreement involving the purchase of quarry land. But the names on the document were not the same as the names on official records. The contract showed that several residents had been pressured into selling their properties. Some claimed they were threatened. Some claimed they were misled. The land was then transferred through multiple companies before being purchased by Thomas Keller, a classic method used to hide ownership. Sarah had discovered a land scheme, but why would that lead to her disappearance? The answer appeared in a handwritten note attached to the contract. Only 4 words. Original survey is missing. Investigators searched historical records again. They found references to an old geological survey conducted in 1979, a survey that showed valuable mineral deposits beneath the land. If true, the property near Miller Quarry was worth millions, but the survey had disappeared, and Sarah had been looking for it. The case was no longer about a missing teacher. It was about a secret worth millions of dollars, a secret powerful enough to destroy careers, a secret powerful enough to make someone disappear. Then, investigators received another unexpected call. An elderly man claimed he knew where the missing survey was. He said he had been waiting decades to reveal it. His name was Frank Dalton. In 1981, he worked as a survey assistant. He had helped create the original documents. And he claimed Sarah Whitmore was not the first person to uncover the truth. She was simply the last person brave enough to expose it. Before meeting investigators, Frank delivered one warning. Be careful who you trust. The people who buried this secret didn't disappear with it. And for the first time in 43 years, the investigators realized something terrifying. The person responsible for Sarah's disappearance may not have been hiding from the case. They may have been watching it the entire time. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The words from Frank Dalton changed the direction of the investigation. The people who buried this secret didn't disappear with it. Those words stayed with every detective who heard them, because they suggested something investigators had not fully considered. The person responsible for Sarah Whitmore's disappearance may have spent decades living among the people searching for answers, not running, not hiding, watching. The meeting with Frank Dalton was arranged at a quiet diner outside Black Ridge County. He arrived early. He sat alone in the corner booth. A cup of untouched coffee rested in front of him. At 87 years old, Frank looked fragile, but his memory was sharp. He remembered dates, names, conversations, details that most people would have forgotten after 40 years. When investigators asked why he waited so long, Frank looked toward the window. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he answered, "Because I thought telling the truth would get someone else hurt." That sentence revealed the fear that had controlled Black Ridge County for decades. People did not remain silent because they believed nothing happened. They remained silent because they believed speaking would cost them everything. Frank explained that in 1979, he worked as an assistant on a geological survey team. The county had hired them to study the land around Miller Quarry. At first, it appeared to be a routine project. Measurements, soil samples, environmental reports. But during testing, the team discovered something unexpected. The land contained valuable mineral deposits, a discovery that could transform the entire county. Millions of dollars, new businesses, new jobs, a complete economic change. But there was a problem. The people who owned the land did not know its true value, and someone realized an opportunity. According to Frank, Thomas Keller, Richard Bell, and Harold Vance began purchasing properties quietly. They created companies, used intermediaries, moved documents. They made sure the original owners never understood what they were selling. Frank discovered the plan when he noticed inconsistencies in the official reports. Numbers had been changed. Pages were missing. Survey results had been altered. He confronted Harold Vance. The response was not anger. It was a warning. Harold told him some things were better left alone. Frank remembered the exact words. You can lose your job for asking questions. You can lose much more for finding answers. Frank said he wanted to report everything, but then his family began receiving anonymous warnings. His truck tires were damaged. His house was watched. Nothing violent. Nothing that could be proven. Just enough to make him afraid. He eventually left the county. But before leaving, he made copies of the original survey. Copies that Sarah Whitmore eventually discovered. Investigators leaned forward when they heard that. Sarah had not discovered the secret by accident. Someone had led her toward it. The question was who. Frank explained that after he left Kentucky, he mailed the copies to someone he trusted, a person who believed the truth should eventually come out. That person was Sarah's former history professor, Harold Vance. The same man, later connected to the land documents. The same man whose name appeared in Sarah's files. Investigators immediately noticed the contradiction. Why would Harold give Sarah evidence if he was part of the conspiracy? Frank had an answer. Because Harold was afraid. According to Frank, Harold had not started the scheme. He had helped hide it. But years later, he regretted his involvement. He wanted someone else to expose the truth. Someone who had credibility. Someone people would believe. Sarah was that person. She was respected. She was determined. And she was not afraid to challenge powerful people. But that made her dangerous. The investigation returned to Sarah's final weeks. Her co-workers described changes in her behavior. She seemed distracted. She stayed late at school. She made unusual phone calls. She began keeping notes. One teacher remembered asking Sarah if everything was okay. Sarah smiled and said, "Sometimes history repeats itself because nobody wants to admit what happened the first time." At the time, nobody understood what she meant. Now they did. Sarah was not just researching history. She was documenting the present. The recovered evidence showed that Sarah planned to expose the land scheme publicly. She had arranged a meeting with a newspaper reporter. She had prepared copies of documents. She had recorded conversations. She knew the people involved had influence, but she believed the truth would protect her. She was wrong. The next breakthrough came from the cassette recording. Audio specialists continued enhancing the damage tape. After weeks of work, they isolated a phrase previously buried beneath static. The male voice said, "Sarah, you don't understand what happens when people lose everything." Then Sarah responded, "People already lost everything. You just made sure nobody knew." Investigators believed those words represented the entire conflict. One side protecting wealth, the other side demanding accountability. The voice comparison still could not provide a confirmed identity, but investigators now had enough information to narrow the possibilities. They compared the voice to surviving recordings from the three main suspects: Thomas Keller, Harold Vance, Richard Bell. Thomas Keller was eliminated. The voice patterns did not match. Richard Bell was difficult to test because no recordings existed, but Harold Vance became the focus. The similarity was not enough for an arrest, but it was enough to reopen every question. When investigators searched Harold Vance's former property, they found something unexpected: a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards of an old office. Inside were dozens of letters. Many were never sent. Most were apologies. Harold wrote about regret, fear, and the choices he wished he could undo. One letter mentioned Sarah directly. The date was January 10th, 1981, 2 days before her disappearance. It read, "Sarah knows about the documents. She wants to make everything public. I warned her to stop. I don't know if she listened." The discovery sent shockwaves through the department. For decades, Harold Vance had presented himself as a grieving former teacher, someone who lost a former student. Now investigators had evidence that he knew Sarah was in danger. But there was another line in the letter, a line that changed everything. "I am not the only one she confronted." Investigators stopped reading, because those words meant Harold was not acting alone. Someone else was involved. Someone Sarah had met after discovering the land documents. someone who may have been responsible for what happened at Miller Quarry. The investigation moved again, back to the final night, back to the quarry road, back to the unknown pickup truck, because now detectives understood something. Sarah did not disappear because she found a secret. She disappeared because she tried to reveal it. And whoever stopped her had spent 43 years believing they had succeeded, but they had made one mistake. They forgot about the detective who never stopped looking. They forgot about the witnesses who still remembered. And they forgot that buried evidence does not mean destroyed evidence. Sometimes, it is simply waiting for the right person to uncover it. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The discovery of Harold Vance's hidden letters changed everything. For 43 years, investigators had searched the person who made Sarah Whitmore disappear. Now they were finally understanding something far more disturbing. The disappearance was never a random act. It was a final move in a plan that had been unfolding for years. Sarah had not stumbled into danger. She had walked directly into a secret protected by people who believed they were untouchable. But the new evidence created a problem. Harold Vance was clearly connected. He knew Sarah had uncovered the documents. He knew she intended to expose the land scheme. He admitted warning her. But was he responsible for her disappearance? Or was he another person trapped inside the same web of fear? Investigators needed answers. And they needed them quickly, because another discovery had appeared inside Harold's letters. A name. One name repeated several times. Not Thomas Keller. Not Richard Bell. Someone else. A man named Victor Hale. In 1981, Victor Hale was a private security contractor who worked for several wealthy landowners in Kentucky. He had no official connection to the quarry project, at least none that appeared in public records. But investigators found something interesting. Victor's company received payments from businesses connected to Thomas Keller during the months before Sarah disappeared. The payments were labeled as Property Protection Services. Avad description, a convenient description. When detectives searched deeper, they discovered Victor had been hired to monitor land disputes, including disputes involving Miller Quarry, the same location where Sarah's vehicle was found, the same location where she recorded her final conversation. The investigation shifted toward Victor Hale, but there was one problem. Victor Hale had disappeared himself, not in 1981, not after Sarah's disappearance, years later. In 1997, he left Kentucky without explanation, no forwarding address, no public records, no contact with former employees. It was as if he had erased himself. Detectives began reconstructing Victor's life. They discovered that before leaving Kentucky, he had attempted to sell personal belongings. Among those items was an old pickup truck, a black 1978 Chevrolet, the same type of vehicle described by witness Daniel Mercer, the same type of vehicle seen near the quarry the night Sarah disappeared. Investigators searched vehicle records. The truck had been sold several times. Eventually, it was registered in another state. But the ownership history contained one strange gap. The period between 1981 and 1983 was missing. 2 years. No records. No explanation. Exactly the time investigators needed to understand. Detective Grayson returned to his old notes again, the habit that followed him for decades, searching through forgotten pages, looking for the detail everyone ignored. Near the middle of his original investigation journal, he found something. A statement from a gas station attendant, a man named Eddie Collins. In 1981, Eddie worked at a small gas station near the highway leading to Miller Quarry. He reported seeing a black pickup truck stop for fuel the night Sarah disappeared. The driver was nervous. The truck had damage on the front passenger side. The detail was dismissed. Investigators believed it was unrelated. Now it mattered, because the recovered sedan showed impact damage on the same side. The vehicle that hit Sarah's car may have left with matching damage. The evidence was beginning to form a timeline. At 6:42 p.m., Sarah left the school. Around 7 p.m., she reached Miller Quarry Road. A conversation began. Something went wrong. Her car struck the guardrail. Then the vehicle was moved, hidden, and someone spent the next 43 years hoping nobody would find it. The question became, why did Sarah go there? The answer was discovered inside her personal journal, a journal that had been returned to her family after the investigation. At the time, nobody realized one page had been removed. Modern forensic examination revealed the missing page had left impressions on the pages beneath it. Using specialized imaging technology, analysts recovered the writing. The hidden message was short, but it changed the case. Sarah had written, "Meeting tonight. He says he has proof. If true, everything changes." Investigators froze. He. Not they. Not a group. One person. Someone Sarah trusted enough to meet alone. Someone who claimed to have proof. The question was no longer who Sarah confronted. It was who called her there. The answer came from an old phone record. A call placed to Sarah's home 2 hours before she disappeared. The number belonged to a payphone outside the Black Ridge County Courthouse, a location used frequently by people who wanted privacy. The call lasted 7 minutes. The identity of the caller was never recorded, but investigators found one person who had access to that phone regularly: Harold Vance, the former teacher, the man who admitted warning Sarah, the man whose letters showed fear, the man who claimed he wanted to help. When detectives questioned Harold again, he finally broke. For the first time, the 84-year-old former teacher stopped denying his involvement. He admitted contacting Sarah. He admitted asking her to meet. He admitted giving her information about the land scheme. But he denied killing her. His explanation was complicated. He said he wanted Sarah to expose the truth, but he also wanted control how it happened. He feared what would happen if the wrong people learned she had evidence. Harold told investigators that on the night Sarah disappeared, he followed her to Miller Quarry. He claimed he wanted to make sure she was safe. But when he arrived, she was already gone. Her car was there. The black pickup was there. And Victor Hale was standing nearby. Harold said he saw Victor arguing with Sarah. He heard shouting. He saw Sarah holding documents. Then he left. He was afraid. Detectives asked the question that mattered most. Why didn't you call police? Harold looked down. His answer explained 43 years of silence. Because I knew exactly who they would believe. The statement revealed the power imbalance that shaped the entire case. Harold believed the system was controlled. He believed the truth would be buried. And instead of fighting, he chose survival. But investigators still needed proof. A confession was not enough. They needed evidence connecting Victor Hale to Sarah's disappearance. That evidence arrived from an unexpected source. A storage facility in Tennessee. After Victor disappeared in 1997, he abandoned several rented units. Inside one of them, investigators found boxes containing old security records, photographs, maps, payment records, and one envelope labeled Whitmore. Inside was a single photograph. Sarah Carter? No, Sarah Whitmore, standing beside the Miller Quarry sign, taken the day before she disappeared. On the back of the photograph was a handwritten note, 6 words. She knows too much now. For the first time in 43 years, investigators had evidence that someone had been watching Sarah before she vanished. Someone had been tracking her movements. Someone had been preparing. And now the cold case that had remained frozen for generations was moving faster than anyone expected. Because the final clue from a retired detective had opened a door. And behind that door was a truth far darker than anyone in Black Ridge County imagined. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The photograph found inside Victor Hale's abandoned storage unit became the most important piece of evidence in the entire investigation, not because it proved what happened to Sarah Whitmore, but because it proved something investigators had suspected for weeks. Sarah was not simply caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was being watched. Someone knew what she was investigating. Someone knew where she was going. Someone knew exactly how dangerous her discovery had become. For 43 years, the people of Black Ridge County believed Sarah vanished during a moment of chaos. Now investigators were seeing a different picture, a planned confrontation, a hidden meeting, and a secret that had been protected by more than one person. The photograph was analyzed by forensic specialists. The date was confirmed. The location was confirmed. And the person who took the photograph was identified through digital enhancement. A reflection in the vehicle window showed the photographer standing several feet away. The image was not clear enough to identify a face, but it revealed something else. The photographer was standing beside a black pickup truck, a truck matching the description given by witnesses in 1981. The same vehicle connected to Victor Hale, the same vehicle seen near Miller Quarry. The investigation moved from suspicion to urgency. Federal investigators were contacted. Search warrants were issued. Every remaining record connected to Victor Hale was examined, and slowly, a hidden history began to emerge. Victor Hale had not been a random security contractor. He had worked for powerful clients across Kentucky. His job was simple: protect property, protect investments, protect information. But investigators discovered that his work often involved more than security. He monitored people. He collected information. He documented conflicts. He created files. And one of those files was about Sarah Whitmore. Inside Victor's records were pages of observations, her daily routine, her work schedule, the places she visited, the people she contacted. Every movement documented. The discovery shocked investigators, because it proved the threat Sarah faced was much larger than anyone understood. She was not only investigating a secret, she had become the subject of an investigation herself. Detective Grayson read through the documents quietly. He had spent most of his career believing he had failed Sarah. Now, he realized something worse. The people responsible had been several steps ahead from the beginning. They were watching the investigation. They knew what police knew. They knew what witnesses said. They knew where detectives searched. And they used that knowledge to stay ahead. The original investigation had not simply gone cold. It had been manipulated. The evidence pointed toward a carefully controlled operation. But one question remained. What happened during Sarah's final conversation? The restored cassette tape provided another answer. Audio experts returned to the damaged recording. Using advanced restoration techniques, they separated layers of sound. A second conversation hidden beneath the original recording was discovered. A few seconds only, but enough. Sarah's voice could be heard. She was not alone. A man spoke. Then another voice appeared. A second male voice. The discovery changed everything. There had not been one person at Miller Quarry. There had been at least two. Investigators compared the voices. The first voice was believed to be Harold Vance. The second remained unidentified, but the tone was familiar, aggressive, confident. Someone who believed he controlled the situation. Investigators believed the second voice belonged to Victor Hale. The conversation revealed a confrontation. Sarah demanded answers. The men demanded the documents. Then Sarah said something that became the most important sentence on the recording. You don't get to erase people. The sentence stayed with everyone involved in the case, because it explained who Sarah was. She was not chasing money. She was not trying to destroy anyone. She was fighting against the idea that powerful people could decide whose stories mattered. The forensic team discovered another important detail. The recording contained the sound of a third object, a vehicle door, opening, then closing. A few seconds later, the sound of an engine. Investigators compared the audio with the recovered vehicle. The sound matched Sarah's sedan, but there was another engine, a larger one, a truck, the same type of truck witnesses remembered. The timeline became clearer. Sarah arrived at Miller Quarry. She met Harold Vance. Victor Hale was already there. An argument followed. The vehicles moved, and then Sarah disappeared. But investigators still needed to know where she went. The answer came from an unexpected source. A former construction worker named Carl Jennings contacted police after seeing the news reports. In 1981, Carl worked near Miller Quarry. He remembered something he had never reported. The morning after Sarah disappeared, he saw fresh tire tracks leading away from a quarry road. 2 sets. One from a sedan, one from a truck. He assumed police already knew, so he said nothing. For 43 years, he carried that memory. When detectives asked why he finally spoke, he answered, "Because I realized everyone thought someone else had the answer." That sentence described the entire case. Everyone waited. Everyone assumed. Everyone believed another person knew more, and the truth remained buried. Investigators returned to the quarry with the new information. They searched areas surrounding the original discovery site. Within hours, they found something hidden beneath a layer of rock, a metal box, rust-covered, damaged, but intact. Inside were documents, photographs, and a small handwritten journal. The journal belonged to Victor Hale. The first pages contained ordinary security notes. Then the entries changed. They became personal, obsessive. They documented Sarah's investigation. They documented conversations. They documented the night she disappeared. One entry, dated January 12, 1981, contained only one sentence. She refuses to stop. The next entry was written several days later. Problem handled. Investigators stared at those words. 2 words. For decades of mystery. A statement that suggested Victor Hale knew exactly what happened. But the final page created an even bigger shock, because Victor did not write that he acted alone. He wrote a name investigators had never expected, a name that changed the entire investigation. Richard Bell, the former sheriff, the man who controlled the original search, the man who directed investigators away from Miller Quarry, the man who died believing the secret would never be uncovered. Suddenly, the case was no longer about one missing woman. It was about a conspiracy that reached inside law enforcement itself. The retired detective's final clue had opened the door, but behind that door was an entire history of deception. And now investigators faced the most difficult question of all. How many people had known the truth in 1981? And how many had chosen to let Sarah Whitmore disappear? The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The name Richard Bell changed everything. For decades, his name had represented authority in Black Ridge County, a sheriff, a public servant. The man whose photograph hung inside the courthouse hallway for years after his retirement. To the community, Richard Bell was remembered as a steady presence during difficult times. But the evidence uncovered inside Victor Hale's hidden journal painted a completely different picture. A man who was not protecting the truth. A man who may have been protecting the people who buried it. The investigation immediately turned toward the original case files. Every report, every interview, every search order, every decision made during the first 72 hours after Sarah Whitmore disappeared. Detectives began reviewing the investigation as if they were examining someone else's work, not because they wanted to blame the past, because they needed to understand how the truth had remained hidden for so long. The first problem appeared in the search records. On January 13, 1981, deputies searched more than 20 locations, fields, roads, abandoned buildings, riverbanks, but Miller Quarry was missing from the official list. A location mentioned by multiple witnesses. A location connected to Sarah's final known movement. A location that was never searched. The reason written in the report was simple. No evidence suggests the subject traveled in that direction. But investigators now knew that statement was false. Evidence did suggest it. Witnesses had said it. A phone call had said it. A damaged vehicle would eventually prove it. Someone had removed that possibility before the search even began, and the person responsible had the authority to make that decision. Richard Bell, the former sheriff, was dead. He could not answer questions. He could not defend himself. But his actions remained inside the records. And records do not forget. Investigators reconstructed the final weeks before Sarah disappeared. They discovered that Richard Bell had attended several private meetings with Thomas Keller and Harold Vance. Officially, those meetings involved county development projects. Unofficially, they involved the land around Miller Quarry, the same land containing valuable mineral deposits, the same land that Sarah was investigating, the same land where she vanished. The connection became impossible to ignore, but investigators still needed the missing piece. Why would Sarah trust Harold Vance? Why would she meet him? Why would she bring evidence to someone connected to the people she was investigating? The answer came from a letter found among Sarah's personal belongings. A letter she never sent. It was addressed to Harold. In it, Sarah wrote, "I believe you are afraid, but I don't believe you are beyond saving." The sentence revealed something important. Sarah did not see Harold as an enemy. She saw him as someone who knew the truth, someone who could help expose it. But the letter continued, "If you're asking me to stop, I need to know why." That sentence suggested Harold had already warned her. He knew something dangerous was coming, but he never told her everything. The investigators questioned Harold Vance again. This time, the conversation was different. He was no longer hiding behind memory loss, no longer pretending he barely knew Sarah. He admitted more. He admitted that Richard Bell had pressured him to stay silent. He admitted Thomas Keller had threatened to destroy his career. And he admitted Victor Hale was hired because they feared Sarah would not stop. But when investigators asked the most important question, "Did you know Sarah would be killed?" Harold looked away. The silence lasted nearly a minute. Then he answered, "No." Another pause. "But I knew they were going to make sure she never spoke publicly." Those words became the turning point, because they changed the case from an accident or confrontation into something deliberate. Someone had planned to silence Sarah. The remaining evidence was sent to prosecutors. But one major obstacle remained. Victor Hale was gone. Richard Bell was dead. Thomas Keller had died years earlier. The three people believed to be central figures were no longer available to face justice. The investigation seemed trapped between the past and the present, until another discovery surfaced. A DNA profile. Inside the recovered sedan, forensic specialists had found biological material beneath the passenger seat. For decades, it had been impossible to analyze, but new technology allowed scientists to create a partial profile. The results shocked investigators. The DNA did not match Sarah. It did not match Harold. It did not match any known investigator. It belonged to an unknown male, a person who had been inside Sarah's vehicle. A person who was not supposed to be there. The sample was entered into national databases. Days passed, then weeks. No match. But investigators refused to stop. They began examining family connections. And eventually they found something. The DNA was connected to a living person, not directly, through a relative, a man named Caleb Hale, Victor Hale's nephew. Caleb had never been considered part of the investigation. He had been a teenager in 1981. He lived outside Kentucky. He had no criminal history, no connection to the quarry. At least, that was what everyone believed. When detectives interviewed Caleb, he immediately denied knowing anything. But his reaction changed when they mentioned the recovered DNA. He became silent. Then he asked one question. "How much do you know?" Investigators realized they had found something, not a confession. Not yet, but fear. The same fear that had controlled Black Ridge County for decades. Caleb eventually admitted his uncle had told him stories about Sarah Whitmore. Stories he thought were exaggerated. Stories he believed were lies. But one detail bothered him. Before Victor disappeared in 1997, he gave Caleb a small envelope. He told him, "If anyone ever asks about Black Ridge, give them this." Caleb kept the envelope hidden for 26 years. He never opened it. Until now. Inside was a final piece of evidence. A handwritten statement from Victor Hale. Not a confession. A warning. Victor wrote, Everyone thinks the sheriff was a mastermind. They are wrong. He was only protecting someone else. Investigators read the sentence repeatedly because it created a new mystery. Richard Bell was not the top of the chain. Thomas Keller was not the top of the chain. Victor Hale was not the top of the chain. Someone else had been controlling the operation. Someone whose identity had remained hidden. The final line of Victor's statement revealed the name, and when investigators saw it, the entire case changed again, because the person named was someone nobody expected, someone still alive, someone who had spent 43 years watching the investigation from a distance, someone who had never once appeared in the original case file. The cold case that began with one missing teacher had become something much larger, and the final secret of Black Ridge County was finally ready to surface. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The name inside Victor Hale's handwritten statement did not belong to a politician. It did not belong to another sheriff. It did not belong to a wealthy businessman. It belonged to a lawyer, Jonathan Mercer. For more than 50 years, Mercer had been one of the most respected attorneys in eastern Kentucky. He rarely appeared in newspapers. He avoided public attention. He never held elected office. Yet nearly every major property transaction in Black Ridge County during the late 1970s and early 1980s passed through his law office. His signature appeared everywhere. Land deeds, corporate filings, trust agreements. Quiet transactions that attracted little attention at the time. Investigators immediately began reconstructing Mercer's career. What they found was unsettling. Dozens of shell companies, property transfers involving the same handful of names, documents prepared within hours of one another, businesses that existed only long enough to purchase land before quietly dissolving. The pattern stretched across years. Someone had carefully built a legal maze designed to hide the real ownership of the quarry property. And Jonathan Mercer had drawn every map. Unlike Richard Bell or Thomas Keller, Mercer was still alive, 91 years old, living in a private assisted care residence outside Louisville. His health was failing. His memory, according to his family, remained remarkably sharp. Detective Thomas Grayson insisted on attending the interview himself. 43 years had led to this moment. He was not about to let someone else ask the questions. Mercer received them without surprise. When Grayson entered the room carrying Sarah Whitmore's case file, the old lawyer looked at the worn cardboard folder for several seconds. Then he quietly said, "So, you finally found a car." Grayson stopped walking. Nobody outside the investigative team knew about several details that had not yet been released publicly. Mercer should not have known, unless he already did. The room became silent. Sheriff Elena Brooks placed a recovered photograph on the table. Mercer studied it. No emotion crossed his face. Next came the restored journal, Victor Hale's handwritten statement, then Sarah's photograph. The old lawyer leaned back slowly. For nearly a minute, he said nothing. Finally, he whispered, "I wondered how long it would take." Grayson asked a question that had waited for decades. What happened to Sarah Whitmore? Mercer closed his eyes. When he answered, his voice sounded tired rather than defensive. She discovered the survey. No denial. No argument. Just a simple acknowledgement. He explained that Sarah had pieced together years of hidden land transactions. She understood the mineral survey had been altered. She realized local families had unknowingly sold valuable land for almost nothing. She intended to deliver every document to a Louisville newspaper. Mercer admitted that meeting would have destroyed everyone involved. Richard Bell, Thomas Keller, Harold Vance, Victor Hale, and himself. According to Mercer, the group decided to convince Sarah to abandon the investigation. Nothing more. Nothing violent. They believed they could scare her. They underestimated her. She refused. Mercer's hands trembled. She said people deserved the truth. The old lawyer stared toward the window. She wouldn't leave. Grayson leaned forward. What happened next? Mercer swallowed. Victor lost control. The room remained completely still. Mercer described the confrontation at Miller Quarry. Sarah arrived carrying copies of documents inside a leather folder. Harold begged her to wait. Richard argued that publishing the survey would destroy the county. Thomas Keller demanded the documents. Sarah refused. Victor Hale stepped forward. He attempted to grab the folder. Sarah pulled away. She hurried toward her car. Victor followed. A struggle began beside the driver's door. Sarah climbed inside. She started the engine. Victor reached through the open window, trying to stop her. The sedan accelerated. Victor jumped backward. Sarah swerved. The car struck the guardrail. Mercer said she was still alive after the impact. Dazed. Injured. Trying to restart the engine. Then panic took over. Nobody wanted police arriving. Nobody wanted questions. Nobody wanted the survey discovered. The decision that followed lasted only seconds, but its consequences lasted 43 years. They removed Sarah from a vehicle. They transported her away from the quarry. Mercer claimed he never saw her again. He insisted Victor Hale and Richard Bell drove away together. Whether Mercer was telling the complete truth remained uncertain. But for the first time, investigators possessed a first-hand account placing every major figure together on the night Sarah disappeared. Sheriff Brooks asked the question everyone feared. Where did they take her? Mercer slowly shook his head. I don't know. Grayson watched him carefully. The old detective had interviewed murderers, kidnappers, fraud artists. He knew deception. He also knew regret. Mercer did not look like a man inventing a story. He looked like someone exhausted by carrying it. Before in an interview, Mercer asked for one piece of paper. With trembling hands, he drew a rough map, an old forestry road, a creek crossing, a section of woodland never mentioned in the original investigation. He slid the map toward Grayson. I always believed. His voice cracked. They buried more than the truth out there. The search began the following morning. Cadaver dogs moved carefully through dense woodland that had changed dramatically since 1981. Old logging roads had disappeared beneath thick forest. Creeks had shifted course. Nature had rewritten the landscape, but Mercer's map matched historical aerial photographs almost perfectly. Near sunset, one dog stopped, then another, both alerted beside a shallow rise covered with mature oak trees. Forensic archaeologists began excavating. The work continued into the following day. Hours passed. Then fragments appeared. Weathered fabric. A rusted zipper. Pieces of deteriorated leather. Nearby investigators recovered a metal clasp. Rachel Kim compared it with photographs taken from Sarah Whitmore's family album. The clasp matched the leather document case Sarah carried on the night she disappeared. Everyone understood what that meant. They were standing where nobody had searched. Not once. 43 years earlier, the investigation had ended miles away. Now, guided by the final memories of an aging lawyer and the forgotten notes of a retired detective, they had reached the place where the last unanswered chapter waited beneath the soil. Detective Thomas Grayson stood quietly behind the excavation team. He looked across the forest. 43 winters. 43 springs. Thousands of mornings when the truth had remained hidden beneath fallen leaves and growing trees. He remembered the promise he made to Sarah's sister during the first week of the investigation. I won't stop looking. At the time, he believed those were comforting words. Now they had become something else. A promise finally approaching its end. The excavation continued as evening shadows stretched across the forest. No one spoke above a whisper. Every scrape of a trowel, every brush across the earth, every newly uncovered fragment carried the weight of 4 decades. And beneath that quiet Kentucky hillside, the past was finally beginning to answer back. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. Morning arrived beneath a gray Kentucky sky. The excavation site was silent except for the steady rhythm of brushes moving across damp earth. No reporters were allowed inside the perimeter. No television cameras. No helicopters. Sheriff Elena Brooks wanted the final chapter of Sarah Whitmore's story to begin with dignity rather than spectacle. Forensic anthropologists worked centimeter by centimeter. Every fragment of soil was screened. Every artifact photographed before it was touched. Just after noon, one investigator raised a gloved hand. The excavation stopped immediately. Partially exposed beneath decades of compacted soil lay a human wristwatch. Its leather band had almost disappeared. The glass face was cracked, but the hands remained frozen. 7:31. Detective Thomas Grayson recognized it instantly. 43 years earlier, Sarah's sister had described the watch in painful detail. It was a birthday gift from our father. She never took it off. Grayson closed his eyes. The watch had waited beneath the earth for more than 4 decades. It had kept its final time. Only its owner had been missing. The excavation continued with even greater care. Several feet away, investigators uncovered fragments of a wool coat, then a leather shoe, then a corroded key ring. Every discovery matched photographs taken before Sarah disappeared. By late afternoon, the forensic team reached the answer everyone had feared and hoped for at the same time: human remains. The scene became completely silent. No celebration. No shouting. Only quiet respect. For Detective Grayson, the moment carried no sense of victory. Justice delayed for 43 years never feels like triumph. It feels like an apology that arrived too late. Sarah Whitmore had finally been found, less than 8 miles from the school where she taught history. Closer than anyone had imagined. The remains were transported to the State Forensic Laboratory. Scientists spent weeks completing the examination. Their findings confirmed what investigators had long suspected. Sarah had survived a collision at Miller Quarry. The crash had not killed her. The injuries were serious but treatable. The cause of death came later. A single blunt force injury to the back of the head, not accidental, not consistent with the vehicle impact. A homicide. The official manner of death finally changed after 43 years. Missing person. Cold case. Homicide solved. The words appeared together on the new investigative report. For many people inside Black Ridge County, seeing those words felt almost impossible. Generations had grown up believing the mystery would never end. Now it finally had. But one question remained unanswered. Who struck the fatal blow? Jonathan Mercer insisted it was Victor Hale. Harold Vance claimed he ran before the violence happened. Victor Hale had disappeared decades earlier. Richard Bell and Thomas Keller were dead. There was no living eyewitness willing to identify the killer until another forgotten piece of evidence surfaced. During the forensic examination of Sarah's recovered document case, technicians noticed something hidden between 2 layers of deteriorated leather, a folded sheet of notebook paper, protected from moisture by the lining, almost perfectly preserved. The handwriting belonged to Sarah. Investigators unfolded it carefully. It was not a diary entry. It was a statement, written only hours before the meeting. If anything happens to me, it means they chose silence over truth. Below that sentence, she listed 4 names: Thomas Keller, Richard Bell, Harold Vance, Victor Hale. No accusations, only names. Then one final sentence: I believe Victor is the most dangerous. The room remained silent. Sarah had identified the threat before she disappeared. She understood exactly who frightened her. The document became the strongest evidence yet connecting Victor Hale to the homicide. Prosecutors announced their conclusion weeks later. Although Victor Hale had died years earlier, investigators officially identified him as the person believed to have delivered the fatal attack. Richard Bell, Thomas Keller, Jonathan Mercer, and Harold Vance were identified as participants in a conspiracy to conceal the crime and obstruct the investigation. No courtroom would ever hear the case. Too much time had passed. Too many people were gone. But history would finally record what happened. For Sarah's family, that mattered. The county courthouse held a public meeting on the anniversary of Sarah's disappearance. Hundreds of residents filled the room. Some remembered searching frozen fields in 1981. Others knew the case only through faded newspaper articles. Sheriff Brooks addressed the crowd quietly. For 43 years, this community asked where Sarah Whitmore was. She paused. Today we can finally answer that question. She did not describe the evidence. She did not describe the violence. Instead, she spoke about courage, about persistence, about the responsibility to keep asking difficult questions. Detective Thomas Grayson remained in the back of the room. He never approached the podium. He never accepted applause. When reporters asked whether he finally felt peace, he answered with the same honesty that had guided him throughout the investigation. No. The reporter looked surprised. Grayson continued. Peace would have meant bringing Sarah home in 1981. He looked towards Sarah's sister, sitting in the front row. What I feel is gratitude. Gratitude that she isn't waiting anymore. Months later, Black Ridge County quietly removed Richard Bell's portrait from the courthouse hallway. No ceremony. No announcement. Just an empty space on the wall. A reminder that reputation can survive for decades. But truth survives even longer. The abandoned Miller Quarry was permanently closed. A small memorial was placed near the entrance. No dramatic inscription, only a simple plaque. It read, in memory of Sarah Whitmore, whose search for truth outlived those who tried to bury it. Every January, fresh flowers appeared beneath the plaque. Nobody knew who left the first bouquet. Soon others followed. Teachers, former students, deputies, families whose own missing loved ones had never come home. The memorial became more than Sarah's. It became a place for every unanswered question, every forgotten investigation, every cold case still waiting. Detective Grayson visited only once. He stood alone beside the memorial as snow began falling across the quiet quarry road. 43 years earlier, he had arrived there believing the truth had disappeared. Now, he understood something very different. Truth does not disappear. People hide it. Time buries it. Fear protects it. But eventually, someone keeps asking questions long enough. Someone refuses to close a notebook. Someone notices the witness everyone ignored. Someone looks at an old map one more time. And sometimes, that is enough to bring an entire lifetime of silence to an end. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The courthouse emptied long before sunset. Television crews packed away their cameras. Reporters filed their final stories. The microphones disappeared. The headlines were written. For the rest of the country, the Sarah Whitmore investigation had become another remarkable cold case finally brought to an end. For Black Ridge County, the ending felt very different, because the people who lived there knew something outsiders never could. A solved case does not erase 43 years. It simply gives those years a name. Detective Thomas Grayson returned to his garage that evening carrying the same cardboard box that had changed everything. The notebooks were still inside. The faded maps. The photographs. The witness interviews. He placed them on the workbench one last time. For years, those pages represented failure. Now, they represented something else. Persistence. He slowly removed the first notebook he had written in during January of 1981. Its cover had almost separated from the binding. The corners were worn smooth. He opened to the very first page. Across the top, written in younger handwriting, were 4 words. Sarah Whitmore, missing female. Nothing more. No predictions. No cities. Just 4 ordinary words. Grayson smiled quietly. He picked up a black marker. Beneath those words, he added another sentence. She came home. He closed the notebook, never to open it again. Across town, Sarah's sister Emily stood inside the old family house. Most of the furniture had remained untouched for decades. The hallway photographs, the grandfather clock, the wooden staircase that creaked in exactly the same places it had in 1981. On the dining room table rested a cardboard box returned by investigators. Inside were Sarah's personal belongings, her wristwatch, her reading glasses, a silver bracelet, a ring. The small leather wallet recovered from the abandoned sedan. Emily lifted the watch carefully into her hands. The hands were still frozen at 7:31. She remembered giving that watch to Sarah after saving money from her first summer job. Back then, it had seemed like such an ordinary gift. Now it had become the last object to accompany her sister through 43 missing years. Emily did not cry. She had already spent decades doing that. Instead, she whispered something almost too quietly to hear. "I found you." That night, another unexpected visitor arrived at the sheriff's office, an elderly woman named Ruth Collins. She carried a small wooden box wrapped inside an old blanket. She explained that her late husband had worked for Thomas Keller during the early 1980s. Before his death, he told her one thing: if they ever solve Sarah's case, give them this. Sheriff Brooks opened the box. Inside rested dozens of old negatives, film negatives, every one carefully labeled with dates. The department immediately contacted forensic imaging specialists. Over the following week, technicians restored hundreds of photographs. Most showed routine construction work around Miller Quarry, road repairs, survey equipment, storage buildings. Then investigators discovered something extraordinary. One photograph had been taken on January 13th, 1981, the morning after Sarah disappeared. Workers stood near the quarry entrance. Behind them, almost hidden beneath fresh tire tracks, was Sarah's blue sedan, not buried, not destroyed, still sitting beside the access road. The timestamp proved something investigators had only suspected. The vehicle remained visible after Sarah disappeared, for at least several hours, which meant someone had deliberately prevented search teams from reaching the location before the spring landslide buried it forever. The image became the final confirmation that the original search had been intentionally redirected. History was rewritten one last time. The Kentucky State Police officially amended the investigation. The original search failure was no longer classified as an investigative mistake. It became documented evidence of deliberate obstruction. The announcement carried enormous consequences. Families with other unresolved investigations from the same era demanded reviews. Dozens of old case files were reopened. Several retired investigators voluntarily returned to assist. Sarah Whitmore's story had become larger than one homicide. It became proof that forgotten cases deserved another chance. Months later, Black Ridge High School dedicated a small scholarship in Sarah's name, not for criminal justice, not for forensic science, for history. The subject Sarah loved most. The scholarship description ended with one sentence: "History matters because the truth belongs to everyone." Students read those words every year without fully understanding why they existed. Perhaps one day they would. Perhaps that was enough. One cold January morning, Detective Grayson visited the cemetery where Sarah had finally been laid to rest. No television crews, no speeches, only quiet snow falling across polished granite. He placed one white rose beside the headstone, then another, exactly 2 flowers, one for Sarah, one for every year he had promised himself he would never stop looking. As he turned to leave, he noticed fresh footprints already in the snow. Someone else had visited before sunrise. There were no flowers, only a folded piece of paper resting against the memorial. Sheriff Brooks unfolded it later that afternoon. It contained no signature, no address, only one sentence typed on an old typewriter. "You solved Sarah's case. You haven't found all of ours." The room fell silent. Investigators immediately searched historical records for similar disappearances. 3 names appeared within minutes. 3 missing people. 3 different counties. 3 investigations handled during Richard Bell's years as sheriff. Each one dismissed. Each one forgotten. Each one involving property disputes connected to companies Jonathan Mercer once represented. Detective Grayson stared at the list for a long time. He had closed Sarah's notebook forever. But someone had quietly placed another one in front of him. Sheriff Brooks looked across the conference room. "Do you think they're connected?" Grayson answered without hesitation. "I don't know." He picked up the anonymous letter one final time. "But whoever sent this wanted us to keep asking questions. Outside, snow drifted slowly across the empty parking lot. The lights inside the sheriff's office remained on long after midnight. Old files returned to the tables. Maps covered the walls again. Coffee cups slowly accumulated beside stacks of forgotten reports. For the people inside that room, one investigation had ended. Another had just begun. Because sometimes solving a cold case doesn't close the past. Sometimes it reveals how much of the past is still waiting to be found. The following story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to actual persons, locations, or events is purely coincidental. The anonymous letter changed the atmosphere inside the Black Ridge County Sheriff's Office. Only weeks earlier, everyone believed they were finally closing the door on the darkest chapter in the county's history. Sarah Whitmore had been found. The people responsible had been identified. The truth had survived. But now another question was sitting on the same desk, where Sarah's case file had rested for decades. Who sent the letter? And why? Detectives began with the obvious possibility. Someone connected to the original investigation wanted attention. Someone wanted revenge. Someone wanted to create another mystery. But after examining the letter, investigators noticed something unusual. The paper was old, not artificially aged, actually old. The typewriter used to create the message was a model commonly used in government offices during the late 1970s and early 1980s. The ink ribbon was worn. The letters were slightly uneven. A person had not typed this message recently. They had used an old machine, a machine they already owned. That detail made the investigation more complicated because it suggested the sender was not creating a new story. They were continuing an old one. Sheriff Elena Brooks ordered a review of the 3 missing person cases mentioned in the letter. The names were Michael Reeves, Donna Carlisle, and James Holloway, 3 people who disappeared between 1978 and 1983. 3 cases that had remained unresolved. 3 names buried beneath decades of forgotten reports. The first file belonged to Michael Reeves. In 1978, Michael was a local accountant who worked with several land development companies. His disappearance was originally treated as voluntary. Investigators believe he left town because of financial problems. But when detectives reopened the file, they found something strange. Michael had been preparing an internal report about suspicious property transactions involving the same network of companies connected to Miller Quarry. The second file belonged to Donna Carlisle. She was a newspaper photographer. In 1980, she was investigating claims that several rural families had been pressured into selling their land. Her camera was recovered. Her photographs were missing. The third file belonged to James Holloway, a surveyor, a man who worked with geological reports, a man who disappeared shortly after requesting access to Archive County records. The connections were impossible to ignore. Land, documents, missing evidence, silence witnesses. The Sarah Whitmore case had not been an isolated tragedy. It had been one piece of something larger. Detective Grayson returned to the original evidence room, the same room where he had spent countless nights during the investigation. The shelves had changed. The computers were newer, but the old files remained. He requested every document connected to property disputes between 1975 and 1985. Within hours, investigators found a pattern. The same names appeared repeatedly. Jonathan Mercer, Thomas Keller, Richard Bell, Victor Hale. But now there was another name, a name hidden beneath layers of paperwork, a name that appeared on only a few documents. Evelyn Cross. In 1981, Evelyn Cross was a county records assistant. She worked directly beneath the office responsible for storing land documents. Officially, she was a low-level employee, someone nobody considered important. But investigators discovered something surprising. Evelyn had accessed several files connected to the Quarry investigation shortly before Sarah disappeared. She had also requested copies of documents related to property transfers. Then, 3 months later, she resigned. No explanation. No forguel. She disappeared from public records. Investigators tracked her to a small town in another state. When they finally located her, Evelyn was 86 years old. She agreed to speak. But before answering any questions, she asked one thing. Did you find Sarah? When Sheriff Brooks said yes, Evelyn closed her eyes. A tear rolled down her face. I always wondered if she would ever be found. That sentence shocked investigators, because Evelyn had never publicly claimed to know anything. Yet she spoke as if she had been waiting. The interview lasted nearly 4 hours. Evelyn revealed that in 1980, she discovered irregularities inside the county archive. Documents had been replaced, pages removed, records rewritten. She believed someone inside the courthouse was altering history. She secretly copied several documents. Then she gave them to Sarah. The two women had never been close friends, but Evelyn admired Sarah's determination. She believed Sarah was the only person brave enough to expose what was happening. But Evelyn also revealed something investigators had never heard before. Sarah was not supposed to meet Harold Vance at Miller Quarry that night. She was supposed to meet someone else. Someone who claimed to have proof of the entire operation. Someone who promised to reveal everything. Evelyn said Sarah received a phone call the afternoon she disappeared. After that call, Sarah changed her plans. She canceled her meeting with the newspaper reporter. She drove toward Miller Quarry, and she never returned. Investigators asked the obvious question. Who called her? Evelyn looked down, then answered, I don't know his name. A pause. But Sarah wrote it down. Every detective in the room leaned forward. Evelyn explained that before Sarah left, she stopped by the courthouse archive. She left a sealed envelope inside Evelyn's desk drawer. A message. A warning. Instructions. Evelyn had hidden it after Sarah disappeared. She was afraid. For 43 years she kept it, because she believed opening it would put someone else in danger. Sheriff Brooks asked a question that mattered. Why give it to us now? Evelyn looked toward the window, because Sarah finally got her answer. Another pause, and now it's time everyone else gets theirs. The next morning, investigators received the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Sarah's handwriting. Only 3 sentences. I know who has been helping them. I know why they're afraid. The person everyone trusts is the one who knows the most. Below those words was a name that caused the entire room to go silent, because it was not Richard Bell, not Thomas Keller, not Jonathan Mercer. It was someone nobody had ever suspected, someone who had spent 40 years appearing as one of the people searching for the truth, someone who had helped solve Sarah's disappearance, and someone who may have known exactly how she vanished. Detective Grayson looked at the name for a long time. Then he slowly closed the file, because after 43 years of searching, the investigators finally understood the most dangerous part of the case. The secret had not been protected by strangers. It had been protected by someone standing beside them the entire time.